Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting the program in just a couple of minutes, but we wanted to say hello. I'm Karen Archer-Perry from NTIA. Jeff?
Hi, everyone. Jeff Sabatka, State Broadband Director.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Woods here with NTIA, BroadbandUSA.
Hi, I'm Shemay Shaheen with the Arizona Commerce Authority.
Everyone, Nathan Christiansen from the Arizona Commerce Authority.
Hello, Kyle Hillman with the Arizona Commerce Authority.
All right, Jeff, we're going to hand it to you so you can take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. Thank you, everyone, for attending our third webinar in partnership with three federal agencies, the NTIA, the USDA, and the EDA, who are all represented on this. This is quite a process. There's actually an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning talking about endurance athletes and talking about how they achieve success over long periods of time. Broadband planning is a process. It's not an overnight thing. And part of what we have to do is really work that process and get through that process one step at a time. One of the athletes was an endurance swimmer. The gentleman would swim back and forth to Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay. And if you've ever been to that area, you know how cold that water is. And he talked about stroke by stroke, just following your process. Another athlete talked about rules of threes. Basically, you're going to have good periods, you're going to have mediocre periods, and you're going to have periods where you really don't want to do this stuff. The key is to power through all three of those and get it done. So we're very excited about this process. Our first webinar, Broadband 101 in March, was incredibly basic in many ways, but it gave you the format for what we're talking about. The second one, Broadband Planning and Local Solutions, really started to hopefully get you thinking about what you can do specifically to your community. And today's workshop, Broadband and Data Workshop, is going to be a deep dive into the tools and the processes to get your community from wanting to do this to having a plan and having the tools to do it. I will tell you that we've had incredible response throughout this process. Many of our communities are already making progress just in the 2 months that we've been at this. I'm going to call out three. Lake Havasu City, which had not been doing much in terms of broadband. Nancy Campbell on the city council has really led the effort over there, and they're moving forward with some very aggressive programs in that community. Yuma County with Susan Thorpe, the county administrator, has done a phenomenal job to rally support and organization in the county. And Joy Whiting, the Apache County School Superintendent, has jumped in with both feet with broadband. All three of these ladies are leading the charge in their counties, and we're looking for more leaders like that throughout our state. I do believe it's important to find a champion. We talk about broadband action teams, but having somebody within the local government to champion this is so important. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Scott, who's going to give you a little rundown of what we're doing today. Thank you, and I appreciate your attendance today.
Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Arizona. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. Today's topic, as Jeff talked about, is going to be on broadband data and using data as a foundation for your broadband planning. As Jeff mentioned before, this is a third on our webinar series. You can go back to the previous slide. He's one-on-one. We talked about broadband planning. We've talked about today, we're talking about using data as a foundation for your plan. We also have upcoming federal resources and local support for broadband. That's going to be with our partners at EDA and USDA, or talk about the federal resources that are available. And then you also hear from some local support and local resources that are available, and local stories that also they're very important to you and where you reside. And then on June 9th, we'll have a tribal only session, followed by July 14th, where we'll talk about broadband adoption and use, which is the secret to sustainable networks. Next slide, please. So here's just an overview of today's agenda. Jeff did the welcome. Thank you, Jeff. I'm just we'll introduce Karen and really set the tone and for today's topic. We'll do a 5-minute break after Karen does her presentation, and then we'll do a demo after the break, and then a wrap up really talking about what comes next in the next technical assistance sessions, the next webinar, reiterating the focus, and then the handouts for the technical assistance sessions will also be provided. Excuse me. Thank you. Next slide, please. So just as a precursor to the next technical assistance sessions on May 19th, again, we're going to follow up on this, and we're going to really delve into using your data, getting your community's data, how to access it, how to use it. And this will be a follow-up from Karen's presentation today. You can see this slide. The time slots are here. We'll have 3 scheduled sessions on that day. And we're really looking forward to joining you and really getting into the individualized data that's applicable to where you are. Next slide, please. And so before I introduce Karen, let me talk a little bit about the prevalence of broadband data. As you know, if you all don't know now, Arizona is officially a member of the National Broadband Availability Map community. Congratulations. I was just telling Jeff prior to we came on, when we launched the NBAM as a pilot program just a couple of years ago, we only had 5 states in that initial pilot. Now we're up to 36 states, and we've done 14 states in this fiscal year alone. So again, the prevalence of data, and Karen's going to touch on this, and this title is applicably titled, right? It is using data as a foundation, right? We use data to inform our decisions, not make our decisions. But data doesn't replace interpersonal communication, right? So the most important thing that you all do is really know your community. And that's why the stakeholder engagement and the planning piece is so important. But data is really important, is that it frames those conversations. On the federal level, we're using data, more and more data, to really inform and assist in making strategic decisions about resources, grant monies, technical assistance, and the like. So it's really exciting time to be on the forefront of utilizing data, accessing data. And so with that, that is going to be the focus and topic of today's presentation. So it is my pleasure to introduce Karen Archer-Perry, who's a senior policy analyst with BroadbandUSA, also a member of my technical assistance team. She comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and foundation. Prior to joining NTIA, Karen is trained classically as an electrical engineer. She spent time in the private sector with Bell Labs, with the FCC working on the National Broadband Report, with the Gates Foundation working on digital inclusion, access, and equity issues, and as well with NTIA now for the last several years, assisting us in a number of different facets in technical assistance, content development, and serving as our resident data expert. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Karen, who will guide you through today's session. Karen, over to you. Thank you, Arizona, and good morning to you.
Thank you, Scott. See if I can get this to advance. There we go. So within the data presentation, I'm going to cover there's a roadmap to the presentation. So first, I'm going to cover the sort of the 3 major federal data sets that talk about broadband data. One from NTIA, one from the FCC, and one from the US Census Bureau called the American Community Survey. Then I'm going to show you a number of different tools, federal tools and non-federal tools, and demonstrate the tools. And then more in our TA session, we're going to give you an opportunity to explore the data from your community and to talk about it. And so that's kind of the roadmap for the topics we'll discuss today and then going into the TA session. Also wanted to point out that we did make a couple of changes to the TA session that you probably noticed on the slide that Scott talked about. Some people asked for a little bit more time, and for the data session, having a little more time is good. So we stretched those sessions out to an hour and a half, and we did consolidate the Maricopa session into one of the other sessions. So we kind of tightened it up to 3 sessions with a little bit more time. And just like before, you're really welcome to join any session that's most convenient for you. So as I mentioned, there's 3 data sets that I'm going to talk about. 2 of them are consumer data sets, as in a consumer survey where we ask people their opinion. The 3rd data set is a very different data set. That's a regulatory data set developed by the FCC based on input from internet service providers. So the first 2 are the NTIA Internet Use Survey and then the American Community Survey. And those are actually the 2 I'm going to talk about a little bit more, because people speak quite frequently about the FCC Form 477 data, but I will talk about all 3 of them, and the tools that I'm going to show you cover all 3 of those and a number of other data sets. So first, let's talk about the NTIA Computer and Internet Use Survey. So when people talk about trends in computer and internet use, oftentimes they quote the Pew Research Center, which is a spectacular source for internet use data. When I was at the Gates Foundation, I was lucky enough to work with Lee Rainey at the Pew Internet Use at the Pew Center, and Pew does wonderful work and they publish great reports. But when the Pew Center does a survey on the internet, their survey sample set is usually 2,000 to 4,000 households. Our survey sample set for the internet use survey is 52,000 households. And the reason that we're able to use 52,000 households for our sample size is because we append our survey to a survey called the US Census's Current Population Survey. And the Current Population Survey is the survey that the Census Bureau does every month to determine the unemployment rate. And they offer the opportunity for other federal agencies to kind of ride along with that survey every now and then, for a fee. And so we ride along with that survey every couple of years to really do a deep dive to understand people's use patterns for computer and internet use. And so we ask roughly 50 questions about computer and internet use. And we ask about device type, internet technologies, location of use, online activities, reasons for use, privacy and security trends. I'm going to show some of that data to you now, but I'm only going to show you just a touch of it. Because that's such an important survey for the US Census Bureau, they're really serious about it. So when they pick you out of the crowd to be part of that random sample set, they really want you to respond. And it's kind of a funny survey. You're part of the survey sample set for usually 2 or 3 months at a time. And they call you back over those 3 months. And then for one of those months, they'd ask you these extra questions. Their response rate for that survey is like 85%. So we get just very detailed information from this survey, and it's very highly valid. And we've been doing it for 25 years. I do have to say, we don't write as many good reports as Pew does. Pew writes wonderful reports. So I think both data sets are good, but in different ways. So let me just show you some of the trends that I think you can really count on. So the way I like to use this data set is because the trends are so solid, they tell you where to look in your community. So these trends are trends that I think you can count on. And so one of the trends that I think you can count on is when you look at where people use the internet, in particular, where people use the internet at home, there are pretty solid trends about differences in rural and urban communities. So people are more likely to use the internet at home in urban communities versus rural communities. So in our 2019 survey, we found that about 73.6% of people use the internet at home across the country. And so that still shows the gap. That means that more than 25% of people do not use the internet at home at all. 74% of them in urban communities have the internet, and 68.5% in rural communities have used the internet at home. But if you look at people who have children at home, as in children ages 8 to 17, that gap narrows and it lifts the whole bar up. So now in urban communities, you've got 88%, and in rural communities, you're at 85%. So that means if you're putting a network in, those are your early adopters. Those are the people who are going to get online quicker. There's always been a gap based on income. And so right now, in the 2019 survey, we found 82% of households over 100K had adopted the internet at home, and under 25K, 57%. That is still a huge gap. And then it just breaks up all the way in between. And if you look at that trend line over time, it's narrowed, but it just has not narrowed enough. And that's one of the reasons why in the Biden administration, they've identified affordability as one of their key issues when we've looked at internet strategy and internet policy. College education has been, or education in general, has also been one of the differentiators when it comes to broadband adoption at home. And so if you've got a college degree, that's 85.6%, no diploma, more like 62%. So kind of a big gap there. And again, it's narrowed, but it hasn't narrowed enough. There are differences when it comes to race and ethnicity, and those are a little bit more all over the map. So if the white families are more likely to have the internet at home at a rate of about 76.9%, and Native Americans are less likely to have the internet. That's the least likely to adopt at a rate of about 63.9%. And then there's kind of a range in between based on race and ethnicity. So in short, there's a lot of reasons, and I think the other questions in the survey dig into those reasons. We ask about affordability concerns, we ask about privacy concerns, we also ask about what people do online. But the bottom line, when you look at all those reasons together, we look at availability, we look at the types of internet people use, is that there's 65 million Americans across the US who don't use the internet alone. There's 10 million Americans who rely solely on their mobile data plan. And 5 million households say that cost is the main reason that they don't use the internet. And so it's still a somewhat checkered pattern when it comes to broadband adoption across the US. I'm not telling you about all of the data that's in the survey because I really just wanted to use this data because it is only granular to the state level. This data is not granular to your neighborhood level, and that's the data I want to focus on today. But I did want to highlight one other element of this data set, which is when we ask people kind of what kinds of activities they do at home. And I had to kind of cut this chart in half. So the 2017 data is kind of on the left-hand, well, I cut the chart in half, so there's two lefts. There's the 2017 data and then the 2019 data, and then I cut the chart in half so you see it again. So, and there's a number of different functions that we ask people about what they do online. And I've circled some of the ones that I think people are doing more of now since the coronavirus kicked in. So ones that I'm dying to see what we're going to hear about in the 2021 study. So teleconferencing or conferencing is at 51% in 2019, and I think we're going to see more of that. And telework was at 24% in 2019. And of course, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. As a matter of fact, I did look at the other sources, and one source found that 51% of Americans use the internet for calls and conferencing. This data particularly said that 23% worked remotely in 2019. One study I found from Gallup indicated that in April of this year, 62% of employees Americans worked at home, which was double the number that had done so the month before. And that kind of brings up to a question that we wanted to ask all of you. We wanted to ask you how you use the internet. And Shimei's got a poll for you. So we wanted to ask you, Shimei, would you just talk through what's on the poll?
Yes, of course. So we have, how do you use your internet? And so we have a few different questions of whether it's like personal or for work. So working from home all the time, working from home part of the time, running your business from home. A lot of it then like on the personal side, whether it's online shopping, social media, streaming, Netflix, connecting with family and Zoom, which is a big thing we've seen with COVID. And if you've marked other, please drop it in the chat. That would be, and so we can kind of see what that looks like. So we have the polling, it's still kind of fluctuating a little bit. I'm going to end it here in a couple seconds.
And it is a check all that apply.
Yes, check all that apply. That is true.
Even just completing this poll, it made me think maybe I should pay more for my broadband.
Ooh, we have some in the chat, some music streaming. That's a big one. Online video games. That's huge. That's a realm we're starting to see a lot more, and even like competition wise. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results, guys.
Online shopping, big winner here.
That's actually interesting to me. I'm curious what that would have looked like before COVID. You know, I know for me, even before COVID, I like to buy all my groceries online and have it shipped, but now COVID gave me an excuse to do that.
I have to admit, sometimes I think the box arrives on my porch and I can't even remember ordering it. It's kind of embarrassing.
Ooh, another one in the chat, distance learning. That's a big one that we forgot to put in there. That's something, you know, that's huge. I mean, it doesn't matter what age you are now, that's kind of being adopted in to like the curriculum.
Oh, that's almost embarrassing because that's such a big one right now. Yeah, we should definitely add that. We will be revising this poll next time we do it. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a second data set, and I do have to say, I don't know if you're supposed to have favorite data sets, but this is my favorite data set. This is the American Community Survey. So the American Community Survey is conducted by the US Census Bureau, and it covers a range of topics. So it covers social topics, housing, and economic topics. And I'm going to focus in on the broadband topics, but one of the nice things about the survey is that there are so many topics and they're interrelated or correlated, so that if you are doing a business plan, you can look across these topics and look at how they relate to each other for your community. So you can look at people's income, at their housing size, at the household density. You could look at the businesses in your community, at how far people are commuting. You could look at race and ethnicity, at educational status, employment information, so poverty status, living arrangements. So there's some wonderful information about computer and internet use, but there's also wonderful information about a range of other topics, and it's really all ready for you in one place. So the American Community Survey, or ACS, is the largest random sample survey that the US Census Bureau does. And I think it's also the largest random sample survey in the world. It used to be called the long form census. So you're probably familiar with the decennial census, which is when the Census Bureau asks everybody a few questions every year. But for the ACS survey, they ask less people, as in 3.5 million households, a lot of questions. And on a 5-year basis, after they've asked 17 million households, they have a sample size that's large enough that they're able to make estimates for all 3,142 counties, for tribal areas, At the 1-year level, they can get to population areas down to 20,000 people. And then at the 5-year level, they can make estimates down to block groups and tracts. So now that I'm talking census language and I'm talking about block groups and tracts, let me kind of explain how sort of census divides up the country. So the smallest census area is a census block. And in a city, a census block really looks like a block. So it's like a city block. It's usually 200 to 300 people, and it could be like a city block. But in a rural area, a census block could be like 10 square miles. And in Alaska, a census block could be like the state of Delaware. So census block isn't really defined by geography, it's defined by a number of people. And then blocks combine to block groups, and they combine to tracts. And even though the geography is kind of uneven, tracts are oftentimes a lot like neighborhoods. And so it really is a pretty granular level when you'll see it on a map for having good data at. And the combination of that into counties is pretty much straight line, as you see in this picture. But everything else is kind of a little bit uneven. You'll see when we look through things. One of the other things that's pretty marvelous about this data set is they update it pretty regularly. So the data that we're working with right now is the 2015 to 2019 data set, which was updated in December 10th of last year. And then on December 9th of this year, we're going to get a whole new fresh set of data. So there are a lot of data tools here, and rather than wait and doing all the demos at the end, I'm going to try something new today, and I'm going to do one of the demos right now. And so maybe I think I'll do 2 of the demos right now. So 2 of the tools that I wanted to show for you are the Quick Facts tool and the Household Pulse Survey tools. And so the Quick Fact tools is Quick Facts. So this is an easy way to get quick facts on your community. And the Household Pulse Survey is actually a special purpose census tool that they developed specifically to get selective data during the coronavirus crisis. And so the Quick Facts is kind of a much more general tool that they offer all the time. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to show you Quick Facts. So for Quick Facts, all you do is you go to US Census Quick Facts, and when you go to it, it kind of defaults to the US. And all you do is you go into the search bar up at the top, and you put in a location. By now, usually it's come up.
Karen, while we wait for that to pull up, I got a question in the chat that asked from Tom Bindings. If it takes 5 years to have a good sample for CPS, how long does it take for the internet append survey to be good at track level?
Sorry, something rang here. So will you say it again?
So if it takes 5 years to have a good sample for CPS, how long does it take for the internet append survey to be good at tract level?
It takes 5 years to get the track level data for ACS. At track level. It takes 5 years to get the track level data for ACS.
Oh, okay.
The CPS survey, which is the CPS survey, which is the NTIA survey, we run that one every 2 years because that's more of a longitudinal survey. And from a cost benefit analysis perspective, we've decided that the trends don't change that much. And that's about what we can afford because it kind of costs a lot to run that one. So we did 1 year run it every year and the trends didn't change that much. This year, I think they're going to change a lot. So So for the CPS survey, that's more of an affordability thing for us. But for the ACS survey, you know, it's sort of a continuous run and they update it every year. But we get new data every year, and we just sort of roll the data every year, and we get fresh data every year, but the data that we get every year is for the last 5 years. Does that make sense?
So it's like a rolling 5 years.
A rolling 5 years.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to do a fresh tab here. Serves me right for getting these all set up ahead of time for you. Just bear with me a minute. Apparently it wants me to start it from ground zero.
Karen, with this, are you trying to select a fact area?
Nope, I'm just trying to type in the town. I might wait and do this one after the break if it's going to give me a hard time.
And Karen, while you do that, let me add too that the ACS data, and I responded to Tom in the chat, the ACS data has an extremely high response rate every year for
Don't give away the answer to our survey.
I'm sorry?
We have a poll on that.
Okay. Sorry.
Don't give the
I'm not going to give it away.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoints and I'm going to do this one after the break, okay? So I will tee that up and I will come back to it after the break for you, okay? Can you see the slides again?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
we can.
Okay, so this is an easy one and I will show it to you right after the break when the internet chooses to cooperate on me again. So one of the data files that is particularly helpful within the American Community Survey is the data on computer and internet use. And again, remember, this is a consumer survey. So we're not asking people how fast your internet is. We're really asking them, and it's not an in-depth survey like the NTIA survey. Remember, because we're asking people about everything. How many people live in your house, where people work. So they just ask a few simple questions. Do you have a computer? Do you subscribe to the internet? If you subscribe to the internet, do you have a wireline subscription? Do you have satellite? Do you have dial-up? If you have a cell phone, do you use cell phone only? Do you have no internet? If you use a computer, do you have a laptop? Do you have a desktop? Do you have a cell phone? Do you only use your cell phone? So really just some basic questions, but those are very powerful questions when it comes to broadband planning and looking for people where you have a digital divide and what kind of gaps you've got. So it turns out that Even though it's only a handful of questions, they're very, very powerful questions when you're looking to identify broadband gaps. And it turns out that they're kind of complementary questions to the information that you're going to get out of the FCC Form 477 data. And I'll show you how that could work. So let me show you how that might look in the FCC for Lake Havasu City. So when you ask people, do you have broadband of any type? For Lake Havasu City, 84% of the people say that they do. And that compares on the US side to 82.7%. But then when you say, do you have fixed broadband? And that means cable, fiber, or DSL, people say 69%. Again, very comparable to the US numbers, which are 68.9%. Do you have satellite? A little higher, 8.6%. Do you use your cell phone only? Again, very comparable to the US numbers, 9%. Do you have no internet? Very comparable to the US numbers, 14% versus 13.9%. So usually I pick an example that shows very radical differences, but Lake Havasu City is very comparable at the city level to the US numbers. But you notice that the map I'm showing you at the right is going to show you some differences. And I'm going to break down and show you something a little bit about that in a minute, and then show you even more when we do a demo. I also want to point out the margin of error, or the plus or minuses here. The margin of error here is showing you the margin of error associated with this data set with each of these numbers. And that's really a pretty small margin of error. And that's what kind of Scott was kind of hinting at, is that for a city that's not really, huge, this is a pretty small margin of error. And that's because it's a large sample size, and they get a very good response rate. And so I wanted to point that out as well. This digs down a little bit deeper. So now these are the tracks within Lake Havasu City. And now I'm just looking at one element of that chart, and that's the wireline internet subscription rate. So the wireline internet subscription rate was 69%. But actually, if you look at the tracks within the city, the range goes all the way from 59.4% on the low end, which are the red tracks, up to 76% on the high end. So really, what's that, about a 15% range across the city. So kind of the median kind of hides that there are pretty big gaps within the city. And we'll look at that in more detail when we do the demos. As I mentioned, there's also information in just this one table about computer usage. And there's information on desktops, laptops, whether people have a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer, or no computer at all. And now we're gonna get to the question that Scott was hinting at, and we wanted to ask you, what do you think the response rate is for this survey? We told you that the response rate for the NTIA survey was 85%. Shimei, will you put the question up? I don't think this is it.
Yes, one moment. I have to switch the poll. There we go.
So would you make a guess? What do you think the response rate is for this one? And I averaged the last 5 years to get the response rate I'm asking you for, because it's actually a different response rate each year.
So right now, it's looking like 72%. I'm going to end the polling here in a little bit, and we'll see what everybody says or what everybody thinks.
Oh, you're tipping your hand if you put the number. Okay. So I guess everybody can see it.
That's a popular number. We don't know if that's the correct number. All right, I'll give it 2 more seconds.
So 72% is the winning number. The actual number is, with 92% was the average. And it was only 92% because it went down to 86% last year. The previous years were above 95%. The reason that they get this huge response rate is when the census picks you to be part of their random sample survey, they show up 8 times. They call you and they show up at your house once. They really let you know that your opinion is very valuable to them, that they really want your opinion. They ask in English and in Spanish and in other languages as well. And they're very persistent, and they let you know that you matter. And they try very hard to convince you to respond. They have a pretty high response rate. So 92% is the average, only because it went down a little bit last year.
No one picked up on my hint.
All right. I'm going to go through one more data set, and then I'm going to take a break and make sure I get all of the demos lined up. I'm going to talk a little bit about the FCC data. And this is really changing gears, because the first 2 data sets that we talked about are consumer surveys. So asking people what they think or what they do. The FCC data set is a completely different data set. The FCC is a regulator, and the FCC, in its role as a regulator, has a part of the obligation of internet service providers is to report to the FCC every 6 months and give them information about broadband deployment as well as broadband adoption. And that shows up in the form of at least 4 different reports. And I know this one's kind of an eye chart, but I wanted to give it to you kind of for your reference, because we usually only talk about a couple of them, but I wanted to kind of let you know what are the kind of major products that the FCC has that could be a reference to you. So the first one is the FCC broadband deployment data and associated, the FCC broadband deployment data. And these are all related to kind of the body of work, which is called the FCC Form 477 data sets and information. And I know it's a funny name, but it's so common that people do call it the Form 477 data. And that's because it's the form that the service providers fill out. So the first one is associated with fixed broadband deployment. And even within that, you'll see that there's information on business services and residential services. And that's the one I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. There's also another data set on mobile broadband deployment. And I won't really be talking about that one, but it's kind of a different kind of a data set, because that one is produced in the form of shape files. And it includes also technology information on what kind of technology is served, whether it's 3G, 4G, 5G, or LTE. And then one that we don't really look at all that much is the FCC does provide subscription information, and they provide information on who subscribes to broadband. The service providers provide subscription information to the FCC, and that subscription information is generally on how much subscription they have, who subscribes to the internet in their communities. FCC puts together a report based on connections per 1,000 households. So it's a quintile report, and it's information on 200 kilobits per second. Oh, I even laugh when I say it. I have so much trouble saying it, as well as on 10 megabits per second down and 1 megabit per second up. I don't usually look at that report very often because of the somewhat low bandwidth and because it's only by quintile. The reason the FCC provides us that data in that way is because the providers believe it to be, and it is, proprietary information to them. And so it's aggregated in such a way that it's should protect their information. But one report that is quite useful is that every year the FCC puts together an annual report. Right now we have the 2020 report, and it's always worth looking at it. Don't usually read the whole report, but I always look at the appendices, and they're easy to look at because for you, all you have to do is search Arizona, and then you can look at all of the data on Arizona. And I have taken some of it and included it in my PowerPoint for you. So first I mentioned the FCC fixed broadband deployment data. And again, that is submitted to the FCC twice a year by the internet service providers. And the good thing about this is that it's block level data. So that's pretty granular data. It's not really quite as granular as people would like to have it because we really want to know not if services provided somewhere in our block. We want to know if services provided everywhere in a block. And the way that the definitions work is that the service providers report if services provided anywhere in the block, not everywhere in the block. So that's kind of one of the definitional flaws. And then the other kind of definitional flaw is that the service doesn't actually have to be provided. It just needs to be able to be provided by the service provider. And then the other kind of definitional flaw is that the service providers for residential service report advertised speed or maximum speed rather than necessarily delivered speed. So in general, this turns out to be an optimistic view of service availability, but it does include the technology. And as I said, that advertised upload and download speed. But for all of those kind of definitional reasons, this is a data set that people sometimes complain about. And even the FCC is very aware of the flaws of the data set and is working right now to improve this data set. The other reason that people complain about it is that it's tied to dollars. So the Connect America Fund uses this data set to make financial decisions. And so that makes it somewhat frustrating. But it is the data set of record for a lot of financial decisions. And that's why it's one that we need to look at. A lot of people like to look at it on a map, but I like to look at it on a table. And so again, I went back to Lake Havasu City, and let me tell you why I like to look at it on a table and what I think we can see when we look at it on a table. So if you look at the FCC Form 477, fixed wireless broadband data for Lake Havasu City on kind of a table basis, here's what I think you'll see. So this is the list of service providers. And the way that I'm looking at it is the first column is the service provider. Second column is the technology. Then I'm looking at the maximum download speed, maximum upload speed, or advertised download and upload speed. I'm looking at the number of blocks in the city that they advertise that they cover, and then the percentage of blocks that are associated with that for the city. So the way that I would read this is that Frontier offers DSL service at 115 meg down and 7 meg up. Now, I know how DSL works, particularly in rural communities. It's a somewhat old technology. So I would say that 115 meg down, 7 meg up might be somewhat optimistic. And so I keep that in mind when I'm looking at this. They say they have fiber in 7 blocks. So it's nice to know that there's fiber there. That Suddenlink has cable at 1 gig down, 50 meg up. So that's useful. And then there's 2 fixed wireless providers covering a number of blocks. We know fixed wireless is a point-to-point service. So in particular, Wirefree is offering fixed wireless over like 96% of the community. I'm sure that they would not suggest that they are covering 96% of the community because it's a point-to-point service. They're only offering service on a point-to-point basis, wherever they can. So they might have that capability or possibility, but they're limited to where they have antennas and on a point-to-point basis. So when you might color this whole map blue and make it, and it might appear that there's multiple providers everywhere, But when you kind of look at it and break it down, understanding the technology, it might help you kind of understand what's there, I think, at a more granular level. Knowing that, and then looking at the FCC Form 477, the FCC Broadband Deployment Report, I think that helps you kind of understand what's in the Broadband Deployment Report a little bit better, because the FCC is not looking at the details underneath that when they look at the reporting. And based on that reporting, the FCC says that 93.5% of the US population has access to 25.3 broadband. They say that 88.7% of Arizonans have access to that speed. But they do say that 46.9% of rural Arizonas have access to that speed. And so using even the optimistic view of broadband deployment, the FCC's 2020 Broadband Deployment Report has noted kind of a gap in broadband deployment in rural Arizona, as well as a gap in mobile deployment in rural Arizona. The right-hand column on the far right is the mobile deployment for mobile LTE at a 10.3 level. So this is taken from the most recent FCC Broadband Deployment Report. Now, this is the last slide I'm going to do before the break, and I'm just going to give you a preview of what we're going to cover after the break. And so this slide just highlights some of the tools we're going to talk about after the break. We're going to talk about a range of tools. Some of them are government tools. Some of them are non-government tools. The non-government tools are the ones that have an asterisk. The NTIA doesn't endorse those tools, but we do find them useful, and so do many of our clients and our partners. So we do include them here, and I'm going to demo some of each of them after we take a 5-minute break. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and I'll figure out why QuickFacts didn't load, and I'll make sure that I have it ready for you when we come back from the break.
Karen, real quickly before we break, I just want to add the good thing about Arizona joining the MBAM is Jeff and his team will have access to what I feel is a superior data set in our MBAM platform. And so while we do have the FCC data, we actually have very granular speed test data from MLabs and Ookla, as well as other broadband stats from reflecting the ACS data and other public and private data sources. So, again, what Karen is giving a very broad overview of the available data sets. I just want to reiterate that one of the great things about Arizona joining the MBAM is that you have the state now has access to a very superior, more granular data set to be able to inform the policymakers and decision makers about broadband availability. So we'll go more detail into that during the technical assistance sessions that we have upcoming. And I'll turn it back to Karen, but we are going to go through a 5-minute break. So thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share so I can make everything work behind the scenes. I didn't check the time. So how much more time do we have before our break is done?
About 30 seconds.
Okay. Do you want to let me send the share back to me.
And Karen, I believe that site is down for everyone.
I think that I figured that out as well. Very tricky.
All right, back to my break. What did we miss?
We determined that QuickFacts is down for everybody.
Oh, interesting.
You know, my friend Bob Balance is a one-person show who does the i3 tool. So
Mhm.
sometimes I call him before I'm going to do a demo and say, Bob, I'm doing a demo, so I need to make sure i3 is up. It's never down, but QuickFacts is pretty flaky.
Interesting.
I'll still just walk through it using just the overview slide.
Karen, have you found NBAM difficult to really master? I mean, is it just something you have to use every day, or is it pretty intuitive?
Can't tell you. I don't know yet.
Okay, I thought you were part of that crew too.
I
am looking to cross over.
I can tell you, I use it every day. It's definitely something you have to use, but it's fairly easy if you know what
Yeah.
you're looking for. And our team does a great job with helping you out with tutorials and both on the web and in person.
Very excited about it. Good opportunity to take advantage of all that data y'all collected.
All right, are we ready to start this back up?
Let's go.
Were there any quick questions that were in the chat that I should address before I start doing the demos?
Fortunately, we've been able to answer all the questions so far, so
Right.
I think we are good to go.
If people do have questions, please do put them in the chat and we will make sure that we do our best to answer them. Okay, now I think we're going to do the fun part. The reason that I try to provide an overview of the data sets is because I think it's important to understand the data and the data sets so that you can use and appreciate the tools. But now I'm going to do the part that I think is a little bit more fun, which is to talk about some of the tools. We've unfortunately established that the reason that Lake Havasu City didn't come up in the QuickFacts tool is that QuickFacts is down. But I will show you how to use the tool anyway and explain to you how it works, because when it works, it is quite simple. So you go to the QuickFacts website, which is right here. And as you saw me try to do multiple times, you just type in the name of your community right in the search bar, and you get QuickFacts on the community. And the QuickFacts are just sort of the top level piece of information from the American Community Survey. So you get the population, and right now we're not looking at your town, we're looking at the US, but you get the population, age and sex of the people in the community, demographic information like race and Hispanic origin. You get housing information on terms of the housing units. And then you get household information like family and living arrangements. You get just top line information on computer and internet use, information on education, health, economy, transportation, income and poverty, business information, and then geography information. One of the nice things is that you can type in one community and then another and then another. So you could type in Lake Havasu City and then Mohave County and then Arizona, and then you would stack up all that information in columns. Or you could type in all of the cities in the Copper Corridor and you'd get all of that information right next to each other so that you could look at the median income of the people in all of those communities right next to each other. If you were doing a business plan, if you wanted to compare them one right after another. So it's very easy to get that information and to do kind of a quick compare one right after another. And then if you wanted to just get rid of one of these things like the United States, there's going to be an X at the top and you just X that one out. So it's just an easy place to get quick facts on your community. So that's the first one. Let me see if I can get rid of this bar. Okay, Shimei, how do I move the bar up?
Which bar?
You have to get rid of the Zoom bar.
Oh, so that you can just grab it and move it to your other screen, like click
Oh,
and drag.
It's gone. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The next one I want to cover is not really a broadband tool, but I did have it on the screen, so I wanted to show it to you very quickly. And this one is the Household Pulse Survey. So this is a temporary survey that the U.S. Census Bureau does to give you information about coronavirus-related topics. And so it's just a dashboard that that they have available, and I have it open right now to the telework screen. And so this is a week by week survey about telework usage. And so right now you can go to Arizona and find that people have indicated for week 28, which is I think April 14th week, that 25.9% of people in Arizona say that they are teleworking at home because of the coronavirus. Because that they're teleworking at home because of the coronavirus. If you wanted to go back a week, you could go back. That was week 14 was that was this week. You could go back other weeks and check other weeks. There's a range of other topics that you could look at besides that: health information, food insufficiency, employment, et cetera, et cetera. So a number of topics, but all really related to kind of this particular crisis. So very current data that they've asked here. But let's get into some of the more broadband related topics. One of the more kind of consumer oriented features, tools that I mentioned was Broadband Now. Oh, I don't think I did this slide yet. So I'm going to have to go back to the slides and show you this one. The Broadband Now tool is, I'll show it to you and then I'll go back to the slide. The Broadband Now tool is very easy to access. All you need to do is type in a zip code, and what will come up here is information on the service providers that are in your area. You get some quick statistics up here, 10 providers that are in your area, with kind of the fastest speed and the average price. But you get a nice summary and you get consumer information that goes right to those providers if you wanted to order them. There is some sponsorship involved in this website, but you do get information from people's actual reviews of those providers. So here it says that the average download speed is 136 megs. But it also indicates that Lake Havasu City is the 83rd most connected city in Arizona, and that only 13% of Lake Havasu City residents, that 13% of Lake Havasu City residents are still severely limited in wireline broadband choices, and that fiber optic internet is available to just 2% of the residents. So you get some kind of a little bit of consumer feedback here. But let me go back to the slides. I forgot before I show you really one of my favorite tools, which is the i3 Connectivity Explorer. So let me show you a few more of the slides here.
Karen, we had a question in the chat that I thought was really good for everyone to hear. So the question was, what is the difference between download and upload speeds? And, yeah, pretty much what's the difference between the two?
The download speed is the speed from, I think, I wish Don
I can
doesn't.
answer that.
Oh, you do that one.
Yep. So download speed is the speed upon which you get access from a remote server. So when you think about download, think about in the context of an end user, you are downloading information from a website or another computer, right? So that is the pace, the speed at which you click your mouse or your laptop or your tablet, and the speed at which your device downloads utilizing your internet connection, the speed at which your device downloads that data from that alternative source. So think about it in terms of iTunes, downloading music, or Netflix, right? Downloading the data necessary to run a movie or to download an album largely depends on the download speed you have in your network. And that's the speed and pace at which you can conduct that task very quickly. Conversely, upload speeds, primarily we use upload speeds when we're uploading information to Facebook, or we're uploading to another repository, or if you're a business, you're uploading reports to a central server for dissemination to your workforce, or if you're a farmer, you have to upload crop reports to Department of Agriculture. So you're actually taking information from your device or your computer and you're sending it to another source. And again, your upload speed, the speed upon which your device processes that and transfers that across the network, that is your upload speed. So if you go back to our first initial session, we do an overview on really basic broadband 101 to include both broadband and upload speeds, latency, and some other technical terms that will help you out. So I hope that was helpful.
And I'm going to show you in one of the demos the download and upload speed averages for Lake Havasu City. And right now I'm uploading information to you on my internet connection, and you're downloading information from us on your internet connection. So let me do a few more PowerPoints before I go to our last couple of demos. I mentioned the US Census American Community Survey data, and I want to tell you how to get access to that. The kind of generic tool to get most of the data is the data.census.gov tool. So the quick facts tool is sort of the quick and dirty way to get kind of the summary data. But if you want access to all the data, including that S2801 table that I told you about, you just go to data.census.gov and you put in the name of your community and you put in that table number, or you can just write internet or computer and you'll get access to those tables. And then I've listed a number of links here that you might also find helpful. The ACS homepage, data.census.gov, the Census Academy, which is where they have their a range of videos that tell all sorts of things, as well as their API in case you're a heavy user and you just want to download all the data. And then this is that table I told you about, the S2801 table and the S2802 table. And these are the tables that give you access to, the computer and internet information on subscription data. I also mentioned MLab and UCLA. So MLab and UCLA are kind of the two most popular speed tests. They're both wonderful. They are the most common speed tests. They're both a little bit different in terms of how they work and how they operate, kind of a little bit the pros and the cons of each one of them. They're both going to test your upload speed and your download speed. They're both going to test latency, which is like delay. They're both going to test from a particular IP address. UCLA has some specific benefits in terms of giving you some really specific sub-census tract level data. And in particular, if you run an UCLA test from your cell phone in your house using your Wi-Fi connection, it will give you a test that shows your internet speed from your house using your Wi-Fi connection that has that geolocation information for your Wi-Fi connection in your house. That said, MLab has kind of a benefit that it's very open source. So when you run an MLab test, all that data goes into kind of an open source file, and it's available to people to download who use MLab data, including you or your town or your community. Some of the UCLA data is open source, but less of it. Mostly people have to purchase it. And so each one of them has benefits. I kind of recommend that you run both of them. They both are wonderful. And usually at this point in our day, and we use both of the speed tests in our NBAM tool. So NBAM, and one of the things that makes NBAM kind of powerful is that we use multiple data sets. So one kind of theme of my presentation to you is that you use multiple data sets in your work, that looking at one data set by itself gives you kind of a lopsided picture. We use multiple data sets in our work, but you have a secret weapon that we don't have, and that is you have local knowledge. And that is probably even more powerful than any data set. And so one of the things that we're going to do in our TA session is we're going to combine the local data sets that you have access to with your local knowledge, because that's the part that brings together your data story and that makes the data useful in your local plan. In the NBAM project, which I think Scott has already highlighted for you, we're pretty excited that so many states have come on board to be our partners. We work with states and federal agencies. And one of the key elements of the NBAM project is to make better investments in broadband. But we've actually kind of started to broaden that project such that there are even more uses for that data set. It's kind of like too good to use it only for that right now. Right now, though, you do need a memo of understanding. And so it does have some limitations in terms of how it's used because of some of the data is proprietary. Speed tests are, there's a lot of ways to run a speed test, and usually at this point in time, I ask you if you want to run one. And so in general, one of the tips for running a speed test is to close down extraneous applications, but I'm not going to ask you to do that because I want you to keep your Zoom connection up. You could run your speed test on your cell phone. If you've got a Wi-Fi connection on your cell phone, then you'll be running maybe an UCLA speed test, and you'd get a geolocation, or you could run it using MLab. I'm going to go to the next slide. You could run, Shimei, will you put both of these links or either one of them into the chat for people?
I put the UCLA one in, and I'll go ahead and drop the other one in just a moment.
Yeah. So if you would run a speed test and then put your upload and download speed into the chat, we would love to find out what kind of uploads and download speeds you're getting from wherever you are. Somebody's getting 54 down and 8 up, which is very rare. Very rare as in that's better than average or worse. Somebody else has got 86 down and 95 up. I am so envious. I'm on cable. I think I've got 17 up, and it's making it really hard for me to do my recordings and my webinars. Somebody else has got 300 meg down and 399 up. I'm loving these symmetrical speeds. Somebody else more like me got 154 down, 10 meg up. 68 down, oop, going too quick for me. 300 meg.
Are you able to talk about the ping?
The ping is the round trip from your computer to the server that they're testing from.
Erickson brought up a good point that ping is usually related to latency, and that's one of my battles I struggle with.
We have been doing a lot of video recording for our webinars, and the ping shows up when your mouth and your words are not synced up. You know, that's one of the ways that, you know, latency shows up when you record. It doesn't look good on the webinars at all. I am very envious of those of you who have these symmetrical speeds. Not quite envious of the person who's got 17 meg down and 4 meg up. But it might be, you know, we don't know if it's working for you or not. Thank you guys for putting that in your, putting that information in the chat. This is the slide that reminded me that I hadn't finished the slides yet. So Broadband Now is an independent broadband availability website. And it does get some support through commissions from internet service providers. But one of the nice things about Broadband Now is it also asks you, when you use the site, for your opinion. And then it takes those opinions and it puts them into the site as well. So it has kind of a competitive ranking of service providers. This is the last tool that I'm going to talk about, and it's one of the ones that I use pretty often. It's called the i3 Connectivity Explorer. And one of the reasons I use it so often is because it gives you a view of multiple data sets in one place, and it's a place-based view of information. So it gives you demographic information, adoption and use information, provider information, and speed test information, as well as other data sets, but all from your community. And you can sort it by a town, a county, a subdivision, a tribal area, a school district, a congressional district, or a state. So it's got kind of a range of ways that you can look at it. And the data sets are pretty broad. So you can look at the FCC Form 477 data, wireless, wireline, or adoption data. Actually, I think you might have taken the adoption data out of it. You can look at the RDOF auctions, internet service provider data, the American Community Survey, demographic or computer data, opportunity zones are in there, CRA tracks are in there, school and library and HBCU data is in there, speed tests and population data is in there. I want to show you that slide. Oh yeah, we'll come back to this in a little. When you get the PowerPoints, I wanted to let you know that at the back of the PowerPoints are some slides that tell you how to set up a notebook in this tool. And I put those in there so that if you did want to set up a notebook before we got together for our TA session, that it would be easy for you to do that. So I have already set up a notebook for Lake Havasu City, and that is right here. So I'm trying to get it on the screen so you can see the most of it. So this is Lake Havasu City in the i3 Explorer. And you can see there's a couple of search bars, a couple of bars across the top, and I've got kind of some basic information across the left-hand side. So I've got population, area, density, median household income, poverty level. And up here, I've got bars about the state, demographic. You can see a lot of options for getting demographic information. This is my search bar for American Community Survey internet data, information on wireless data, wireline data, and speed test data. I'm going to start by looking at the service providers that are in here. So I'm going to start by looking at the wireline service providers that are here. And remember, that's one that I showed you in the PowerPoint. So looking at the wireline service providers, there's a lot of ways that I can, first off, it's always good to know what data you're looking at. So I'm going to go about the data. And you can see here that I'm looking at the FCC Form 477 fixed data. And the version I'm looking at is the most recent version, which is the 2020 data.
Hey, Karen, with this, is there an account that is needed for this, or is this public?
You do have to set up an account and it's free. Then the first searching that you do is you search on the, you can sort it any way. I like to sort it on any, but if you wanted to, you could look at just 25.3 or faster, or you could look at slower than 10.1. So if you're looking at a particular grant and you have kind of some specific requirement, you might want to pick a sort here other than any, but I usually pick any. You can either include or exclude satellite providers. So now I've added the satellite providers into this search. I'm going to get rid of them right now just for simplicity. And I usually want to show the technologies. And I can look at either the home providers, or I can look at the business providers. So now I'm looking at the business providers in the area. And we can look at it by block, group, or track. I usually go by block. And I can look at it, I'm looking at it here. I told you why I like to look at it on a table view, because that kind of lets me put kind of my own personal filter on how I like to look at the table. If you wanted to, you could look at it on a map view, and you could look at all of the providers on the map by just going like this. But it would all be blue because they all say they cover a lot. And you could look around and you could see who says they cover what. I think it's a little more interesting to look at it this way. So Frontier says they've got 7 blocks of fiber. So I want to know, well, where do they have 7 blocks of fiber?
Karen, is there a way to separate looking at businesses versus residential at the same time, or in comparison to?
No, because they're separate reports.
Okay.
They're separate reports. And one of the reasons that they're separate reports is because service providers oftentimes are more aggressive in terms of the services that they are going to suggest that they can offer. One of the recent features that Bob just offered here is the FCC auction results here. So I thought this was pretty interesting. So I just wanted to point this out just because it is a brand new feature. So the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund was a recent auction that the FCC offered. And those auction results are, I'm going to sneeze. Those auction results are, those auction results are also listed here. And you can see that, a consortium get 24 blocks. You can see how much they paid for those blocks. and you can look at where they are in this area. I think more interesting than this is I had mentioned that we know that when we looked at the summary information for the ACS data, that Lake Havasu City was very similar to Arizona and to the US when it came to the adoption information in terms of, 69% of people have wireline, 13.9% of people don't have broadband, but that wasn't really quite as even when you looked at the more detailed level. So I'm going to go from the summary to the map data.
Karen,
So
there's
now I've
another,
gone from the 447
there was
data.
another
I'm going to go
question.
now to the ACS data. Please.
There's another question in the chat. When you're looking at this data, can you tell exactly where the digital divide is on the map?
This is going to be a very good place to figure it out. So here I'm looking at, oh, that was a good setup. Thank you. So here I'm looking at the adoption data, and adoption data is a much better way to find the digital divide. So first I'm looking at no internet access. And so in general, red is bad. So down here, 25% of the people have no internet access. And that compares to over here, 10% of the people have no internet access. So kind of a pretty big gap. But also I want to point something else out. One of the nice features here is that I can jump up from Lake Havasu City by just using that little button right there at the top left. I can jump up to the county. Let me see, I gotta zoom out a little. When I zoom out to the county, you can look up at this part of the county, you can see that 38.6% of the people up here have no internet access. And up here, 38.6 as well.
Looks like we lost Karen.
Appears we're having technical difficulties. So just give us a moment while we figure things out. It looks like Karen internet service dropped her off.
Yeah, I'm looking at everything in the chat. The conversations in the chat. We're just going to take a 5-minute break. Presenter, we lost our presenter. So let's take a 5-minute break until she gets back on. We'll start up.
Thanks, Nathan. All right, is everybody back? Shemay, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about the technical assistance sessions coming up. And unfortunately, with Karen dropping, we're not going to have the ability to do the example we were hoping for, but we're getting pretty close to time. So Shemay, if you'd like to go ahead and give a quick overview of these.
Yeah, so, we just went through a lot of data, a lot of data overviews and what different resources are available. And what Karen was kind of starting to go into was a little bit more in depth with the community. And as mentioned before, that's what we're looking to see in the TA sessions. We have a survey I'm going to drop in the chat that you'll have an opportunity to specify if there's any specific type of data that you would like to see during these TA sessions. We did, as mentioned before, we did consolidate it down into 3 different sessions, and then we expanded it out by 30 minutes because that was a lot of feedback that we received, was it's just not enough time to give questions, and there's so much detail that we're giving. So we tried to accommodate with that. And we also tried to group everybody by similar regions that might be going through similar situations. So that's the reason why we've kind of separated it out this way. But feel free to join any of them. I think that no matter what, it's going to be a good topic and good discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the chat. So here's the survey. I'm going to pass it back to Jeff. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Great. Unfortunately, we're not able to do my screen right now, but I'd like to just make everyone aware of the upcoming webinar next month, June 2nd. It's federal resources and local support for broadband. So it'll give us the ability to talk a little bit about some of these federal programs we keep hearing about in much more depth. In addition to that, we have a second general session one on June 9th. Now this is invitation only for Arizona's Native American tribes on tribal networks, services, and solutions. The reason we are doing that is there are some very specific programs in both of the stimulus bills for tribes, both directly through tribal governments and through tribal education institutions that fall under a really interesting plan from the first stimulus. So again, a lot going on. We're certainly not done yet. Hopefully each one of these builds upon the one in front of it. And we come out with some really good plans, some really good applications, and get some great projects funded. I can't stress enough how encouraged I am by many of the counties and the communities stepping up to really take the lead on this. This is a process, it takes time, but this is a process where there's funding available right now. And we're going to continue to work at this and make sure Arizona brings home some of these federal dollars and gets this infrastructure built. This will not go on forever. This is something that I personally believe we've got a year to 18 months of these type of programs. We need to take advantage of them and get some of this stuff funded and built. And again, this infrastructure is something that will last us for 20 years or more if done correctly. So thank you so much for attending. Our patience, obviously, we had a bit of a technical issue with Karen, although she was very, very close to the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email Shemay or myself. If it's a federal issue, we can certainly pass that on to Karen and get you some answers. As Shemay mentioned, the breakout sessions coming up in a couple weeks are great opportunities to do a deep dive on your community. So if you're interested in finding out more and letting one of the technical gurus sort of run the thing and come up with the information in real time, please do attend. Appreciate your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
We actually have Karen back. Karen, would you like to say or add anything else as well?
Do you want me to do the wrap up on the TA session?
Yeah, I believe so. We did that, but I believe you had a shout out about the tribal webinars or the NTIA.
Well, I don't know. I think Jeff wrapped it up well. So I think we'll call it good enough. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Great. Have a great day. Thank you.